Masvidal, and there were stories coming out from the Masvidal camp, and he revealed that, and I'm going to read quickly MMA Junkie, and this was 9 hours ago. This article came out. I am not reading the whole article, ladies and gentlemen, so I'm not doing that. Because looking at things, and I'm trying to read something and concentrate on everything else that's going on the board. So I'm not going to read everything because I sound like an idiot sometimes when I'm trying to do everything at once. Before the cancellation of the UFC 249, Jorge Masvidal says that the fight of Kamaru Usman almost came to fruition. Masvidal, who's 35-13 MMA, 12-6 in the UFC, has cemented himself as the number one contender in the 170-pound division with 3 stoppages wins since 2019, and a fight with UFC welterweight champion Usman, 16-1, 11-0 as a UFC, has been in the works ever since. Speaking to BT Sports, Masvidal revealed that a deal was on the table for the two to compete at UFC 249, but ultimately he wasn't satisfied with the offer. Now, this is a crazy story because this would have been that big sell. That would have, if they were actually on this card, I think the card would have existed still. I think one way or another, Dana White would have made sure that this fight would have happened on this card. But I think with everything slapped on the wall, and I told you it didn't stick, I think he had to cancel it, and then ESPN and Disney stepped in. I think it all came to fruition after that. If this was on that card and it stayed on that card, I really believe this card would have still went on April 18th. I really do believe it.
I think, no, it definitely would have. This right here would have made the fight card a lot better. And when I say a lot better,
light years better. Yeah.
Light years better.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if they did Doug Rose actually did the UFC a favor by pulling out of that fight, out of that whole fight card. If this was to happen, it would have been a nice matchup. It would have been a really nice matchup because you have Masvidal, who became an overnight sensation. I'm going to use that.
Even though he lost 3 fights, back to back times.
He beat the one fight that I would say there's no controversy about was when he beat Till.
Mm-hmm. He kicked, and I'll tell you, he kicked the crap out of Nate Diaz. He did, and even though I do believe that, and I know what you're going to say with the Nate Diaz, if it went further into the fight, into the championship fight, and Masvidal he's never gone all the way through. If that would have happened, Masvidal probably would have lost against Nate Diaz. I know that's what you're going to say, right? Is that what you're going to say?
Of course.
I knew you were going to say that.
Because I was saying it that damn day when I was sitting right next to Mike Washington saying the same damn thing when that doctor came. The minute I saw that doctor come in, who's a terrible doctor, he's been known even in the boxing world to stop things too damn early. The minute I saw him come in, forget it. I think I started putting my damn shoes on and grabbing my keys and.
Oh, you watched it with Mike, huh?
I was watching it with Washington, man. I'll tell you, and it was. And you want
good old Mike Washington.
Hey, listen, you want to talk about a guy who, when we talk about overcharging, is the UFC overcharging for the fights? Mm-hmm. Ask Mike. Thank God Mike has the fights on. Ask Mike how he feels about this whole thing about how the UFC they overcharge now with the app. And the Fight Pass and the pay-per-view. Not only do you have to buy the app, which is a subscription, but then on top of that, then you have to buy the pay-per-view on top of the subscription.
Right.
So they're already overcharging you right off the bat. So it's ridiculous. But this fight, going back to this fight, this would have been a nice fight because I know a lot of people want to see Usman and Covington because Covington ultimately is trying to.
Didn't we see that fight already?
But he's not done. Covington is trying to be Conor McGregor. He's trying to be Conor McGregor.
Well, good for him. Covington lost. He's terrible. He lost. And I understand, and I'm going. We can go back and forth about what Covington is or what he. And a lot of people like Covington because he's really the people's guy.
What people?
The fans love him. Fans love him.
He's a schmuck.
Well, I know you think he's a schmuck, but the people love him. So I understand that. But who is Covington beaten? Really, who is he beaten?
That's what I want to know. Okay, he beat Robbie Lawler by sitting on him for 3 rounds. And how old is Robbie Lawler? We're going to go back into this. Mm-hmm. How old is Robbie Lawler?
Well, yeah, he's like 38, 37 years
But
old.
we're talking about a kid that started fighting when he was 16 years old. But so by the time he was 26, when most fighters are in their peak, his body had so much wear and tear on him that he should have thought about retiring then. And if that wasn't enough, when he started getting even later into his 20s, when he fought Rory McDonald,
Right.
that fight broke both those guys. There was something different with both of those guys. I'm not saying taking anything away from Rory.
Right.
But after that war that they had, both of those guys were in the hospital for almost a week. You can't tell me a fight like that, just like with Joanna, with that fight against Zhang. A fight like that doesn't necessarily destroy your career, but you come out a little bit different. And
A little bit, a lot.
Well,
completely.
You even see it in boxing.
Absolutely.
You even see it in boxing.
Pacquiao was never the same fighter after he got knocked out. He was never the same fighter.
But how many times? And we're going to go into boxing now. That's fine.
No, I'm just mentioning boxing. I'm looking in the boxing.
I'm saying this is a
you brought up
perfect
boxing,
example.
so I'm bringing
but
up
this is a very
boxing.
good example. This is a very good example, though. When you do the parallel, when you see the fights, and let's be real, when it comes to some of the fights in boxing, you see. I personally think you see more decisions now, and fights go the length, or you see knockouts later on than you did in the 80s and 90s. Can we agree on that? So with that being said, every
Stronger
round,
fighters.
Stronger fighters, stronger competition, more even competition.
Yes.
Whether they're superstars or not, it doesn't matter. You're going to see more longer duration fights, just like you now see
more
longer,
money.
and you see more longer duration fights in
Absolutely.
the UFC. So with that being said, and even worse in boxing, where the number one target is the head, as much as people want to worry about brain trauma in MMA, we're talking about 3 rounds where people are getting popped in the head. I don't care what size those gloves are.
Yeah.
After how many fights they even have as an amateur and such, when you see all that, they come out different. And you see, it's how many fights would you say, and probably even when they had the fights on, before he went pay-per-view, when he had Pacquiao on HBO, the fights that he had with, who was it, Barrera? Marquez.
Marquez.
The fights that he had with Marquez. How many fights did he have with Marquez that went the distance?
He fought Marquez.
4 times?
He fought him 4 times, and
Three
out
of the 4 went the distance?
No, I think he fought him 3 times, and they were 1-1, and then Marquez knocked him out on the 3rd fight.
And then he had another, I think, trilogy with another contender. I'm sorry if I'm getting them confused. But it was a couple of the fights were
The
on HBO
perfect person to talk to about this is Eric.
I was going to say.
Eric would tell you everything, every single thing about Marquez and Pacquiao.
When you have fights like that,
Right.
let alone numerous fights like that, you can't tell me it doesn't change the athlete. And like it did Robbie Lawler, like it did Rory McDonald. Right now, unfortunately, the best fight for Usman, if people wanted to say what's the fairest fight and the most competitive fight for Usman, it's probably Leon Edwards. But Leon Edwards is not a big showpiece like Masvidal with that ridiculous Toys R Us belt that they have, okay, where you had to bring out the Rock, the BMF. That's the most ridiculous thing I ever saw in my entire life. And then you have, after him, you have, the politician, you have Covington. Masvidal is already 35, 36 years old.
Right. They were all old.
35 and 13
They
or
were
something
all
like
old.
that.
They were all old.
So but Leon Edwards, we're talking about a kid who's 18 and 3,
Right.
Still in his 20s. That's what we were talking about before. We always go back to it. I know we sound like a broken record, but we have to go back to it because that's ultimately what will build the sport up, just like it does in other sports. If you build up the Leon Edwards type fighter, the young up-and-comer, but the poor kid is now going to have to sit, even though he's number 4 contender, I think he should be higher. Should be higher. The kid's coming off a 6 or 7 fight win streak. Masvidal beat Nate because the doctor stopped it. Masvidal didn't stop it. The doctor stopped it.
Well, I want to see Nate Diaz and Masvidal fight again. I
Even better
really
than
do
that,
want to see that.
Masvidal knocked out Ben Askren,
Right.
okay, who was drooling as he was walking in before the fight.
Right.
Knocked him out with a flying knee. Wow. You know what I mean? He's getting ready to go on to the next.
I have a question to ask you before you go on with this. UFC 249, they postponed this fight. Does any of these fights actually exist and will ever happen after COVID-19 is over? Do you think any one of these fights that was on the card that will happen?
Yes. No.
Besides,
No.
and I'm not talking about Khabib and Ferguson. I'm not talking about that.
I'm not talking about that either.
I'm talking about all the other fights because to me, I think this fight was, like I said, it stuck to the wall, and Dana just wanted to put fights together. He wanted to make sure that Khabib and Ferguson was the headliner, and he just put fights together. I have not seen, and I'll say this again, and I'll tell you guys this over and over again, I have not seen one card in the last, really since the Khabib and Conor McGregor fight, I have not seen one card that was all around a great card that the UFC has put together for the fans to watch. Not one. Not one. Not one. To me, that's a problem. That's a problem because I look at the UFC, and I am a big MMA fan. I don't want anybody to think that I hate mixed martial arts because I take shots at Dana White and I take shots at the organization as a whole on what it is doing and how it is growing. And he's not growing. He's growing the content, obviously, because he's got Conor McGregor opening his big fat mouth, and then John Jones doing the stupid the crap he does on and off out of the octagon. It's building content because it's something to talk about. The problem with the UFC is, you were just saying it, Masvidal. How old is Masvidal? He's in his mid-30s.
35 years old, 36.
You got Tyrone Woodley, your number one contender. Your number one contender for Usman in the 170 division, the welterweight division, and he is 38 years old. You're talking about the best fighters. The best fighters in the UFC. Tyrone Woodley is one of the top 10 fighters in the UFC. Masvidal, even though he lost 3 of his last 6 fights, he's one of the top fighters in the UFC because of his hard hitting and really his big mouth and what he dresses out of the octagon. I mean, wearing robes to these events. I mean, this guy has a set of balls on him. He really does. And Nate Diaz has a set of balls too, because he's out there in the audience smoking marijuana. That's what he does. He doesn't give a crap what the UFC told him. And by the way, as much as everybody says that the UFC, does what they want, Nate Diaz, okay, after the fight, obviously they take blood and they take blood tests and they take drug tests. Nate Diaz, there was marijuana found in Nate Diaz's body before and after the fight when they take the blood test. Did they cancel the fight? No, they didn't. Do you know why they didn't cancel the fight? Because if they canceled the fight, it would have hurt the card. And obviously Dana White was hiding things. Don't give me the crap that Nate Diaz passed a drug test before the fight, because he didn't. He absolutely didn't. How do you pass a drug test? Unless he's cheating or he's using somebody else's piss. Because Nate Diaz smokes marijuana religiously. He says it go on his Twitter. Go on his Twitter. He posts smoking blunts all the time. When he's out in the audience, he's smoking liquid.
He's probably got a doctor's note. Is it that hard to get a doctor's note?
Yeah, but even with the doctor's note, you can't. That's an advantage you have going into the ring. If you're smoking marijuana, it's like taking a pill. It's like taking a pill, like a Percocet.
Wait. You're saying weed is a performance enhancer?
No. I'm saying no. Either is Percocet. Either is Percocet. But if they find Percocet, it's cheating. Because what is it doing? If you're getting your arm bent back and you're on a Percocet, are you really feeling it? Probably not. Not as bad as a guy that's not on a Percocet. If you're smoking marijuana, you're walking into a ring.
You're talking about from the idea of making a
threshold. Absolutely.
I understand what you're saying.
Absolutely. And you don't tell me that Nate Diaz, before his fights, he doesn't go into the octagon high. Because look at what his face looks like at the end of the fight, and the guy's dancing around with a smile on his face. Don't give me that crap. He is absolutely smoking weed before his fights. So, and that's an advantage he has against the other fighters, believe it or not. That's an advantage. It's not steroids. And I don't think, again, the only sport that I think steroids should not be allowed to be used in is MMA and boxing, because there's too much abuse to the head. That's it. Baseball, basketball, even football, hockey. I think steroids, because it's a way to heal, HGH. It helps you heal quicker. I think athletes should be allowed to use it. If it hurts their body, that's their problem. They're making millions and millions of dollars. Their families are covered. So I don't think it matters. As long as these guys are on the field and they're helping the organizations grow and make money, they're making money. Why do we give a crap what they're doing? It makes the game better. But MMA, they should not be allowed to take that's an advantage that you have.